Good evening, everyone. I'm Paul Wagman, your host for In Our Midst, an interview program in which we talk to notable members of Central Reform congregation. Tonight, I think we're all in for a special treat. My guest tonight is Hava Polinsky. Hava has been playing the violin since she was 5, and she's been knocking people's socks off pretty much ever since. Most CRC members know her as the young lady who has played Kol Nidre on Erev Yom Kippur nearly every year since 2014. Most of us, however, have never heard Hava actually speak. Tonight's program, therefore, represents a long overdue opportunity for all of us to get to know this remarkable young woman a bit better. And having had the opportunity to talk to Hava last week in preparation for this interview, I can assure you that you're in for a treat. A few biographical details before we start. Hava is now 21. She grew up in Clayton, the daughter of a neurosurgeon, Dr. Robert Polinsky, and a speech pathologist turned full-time mom, Debbie Polinsky. She has 2 older sisters. It's a musical family. Her dad plays the violin quite well himself, and his mother played as well. Hava's dad played an important role in her violin education. Hava has already won all kinds of honors and achieved all kinds of milestones. At age 11, she won the St. Louis Got Talent competition. The next year, she won the University City Young Artists competition. In 2015, she won the St. Louis Symphony Youth Orchestra concerto competition, which, given the high caliber of the St. Louis Symphony Youth Orchestra, is an enormous accomplishment. And in 2017, just to show it wasn't a fluke, she won it again. Meanwhile, on December 31st, 2016, she actually performed as the surprise New Year's Eve guest soloist with the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra itself. Hava graduated from Clayton High School in 2017, and that fall enrolled at the distinguished Juilliard School of Music in New York. She earned her Bachelor of Music degree there in violin performance last June and started on a master's degree this past September, last month. She's speaking to us tonight from her apartment in New York City, close by the Juilliard campus. I want to start with a procedural matter, and that is to add that I'm going to ask Hava a bunch of questions now, but all of you in the audience are welcome to write your own questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. And at about 40 minutes into the program, I will start reading those questions. I also want to add that our next, before we get to Hava, our next program within our midst will be with Ben Hockman, the sports columnist for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and that will be on November 11th. Hava, let me begin by asking you about your beginnings as a violinist. It's my understanding, and tell me if I've got this straight, that you actually wanted to play the drums, and that you went to your parents and said, I'm desperate to play the drums. And they said, you know what, this household is crazy enough already, and the market in Jewish female drummers is pretty thin. Hava, what about taking up the violin? Have I got that story straight? Is that how it started?
Not quite.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, please straighten me out.
First of all, I just want to say I'm super happy to be here. It means a lot. CRC holds such a special place in my heart, and I'm super happy to have this opportunity to be here. So I did start playing. I started playing the violin when I was 5. My 2 older sisters were both musical at the time, playing piano here and there, singing here and there. And because I want to do everything to be like my sisters, I also wanted to play a musical instrument. And after being surrounded by the classical music that my dad was playing in the house, that was pretty violin heavy, there was something that inside of me just said that this is what I want to do. And so I was standing in the corner of my kitchen and I went up to my parents and I was like, I want to play the violin. and
You were 5 years old at the time.
and I was 5.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. I mean, no, but I think about that a lot because I think that was something that was really sort of special for me, was that from that moment in my kitchen, it was always just my genuine passion for this thing that I didn't even know was going to blossom into my whole life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, you had some kind of instinct, though, that this would thrill you, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you begin? I mean, where did you start? In the Suzuki program?
So my parents found this teacher for me. Her name is Nora Typen, and she still has a very up and going violin studio. She has a studio, I think it's on like Hanley and Delmar. And I started with her, and we had a very immediate, very special connection. And so at first I did start with Suzuki. I did about a year of Suzuki. I got like halfway through the full program, and then she decided that another path was going to be best for me. And I think she was right. I mean, turned out pretty well. So I studied with her from the age of like 5 until about 8. And then when I was 8, I started studying with Dana Myers, who is a current member of the St. Louis Symphony First Violin Section.
Was she a member of the St. Louis Symphony at that time?
Yes.
So I suspect a little modesty here, Hava. You're 8 years old and you're now studying with a violinist in the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. That doesn't happen to most kids.
I was really excited. I definitely was like, celebrity status, right? Like the St. Louis Symphony is like bowing down. But again, with Dana, I just really felt such a connection to her that she took me leaps and bounds. So I studied with Dana until I was about 14 or 15. And then at that time, I switched teachers and I studied with Ju Kim, who is another member of the First Violin Section of the St. Louis Symphony. And again, like just really a fantastic connection. We worked so well together. And she really excelled me to a place where I was ready to take these auditions for these conservatories that are so competitive.
Right.
So yeah, I'm so grateful for all of them. I would not have been able to do it without a single one of them.
How old were you, Hava, when you realized that you might really have a gift, if I may put it so, in a way that's, that may embarrass you? When did you begin to believe in yourself in a really deep way?
So when I was 11, I entered the St. Louis Got Talent competition, which was sponsored by Nishma. And it was just a local talent competition. And at this time, I had never competed before. I'm not even sure that I had like played in that public of a setting. It was more so just like recitals in my living room and recitals for my teacher.
Right.
But in that competition, I ended up winning first prize. And
how many kids had entered the competition?
I think there were 12 acts that entered, of all ages, of all art forms, of all crafts.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that moment, that definitely gave me a sense of confidence that, maybe I do know what I'm doing with this thing. And then after that, I definitely started competing more. At that point, I was entering the Alton Concerto competition and the U City competition in Belleville, and then St. Louis Youth Orchestra for the first time. And I was receiving all of these awards, but at the same time, my passion inside was just growing exponentially, that I had the validation from the juries and the public. And in addition to that, it was just what I absolutely loved, and there was nothing else that I wanted to do.
What kind of a schedule did you maintain? How much were you practicing, Hava?
The numbers are still increasing, but when I was 11 years old, I can only focus for so long, right? My brain is not fully developed, so I was putting in about maybe 2 hours a day at that point. Mm-hmm. Which, a couple years later got to 3, 3.5. And then around the time that I started auditioning for undergrad for conservatories, I realized that the only way to get better is to do it as much as I possibly can. And so at that point, I started practicing about 4 to 5 hours a day. And 5 is sort of my center point now. It's sort of, I can't play past pain, right? So like my tendons and my muscles, I have to be careful of an overuse injury. So I have to keep that in mind. But, it helps that I love to do it. So
sure.
I try to make practicing as enjoyable as I possibly can. But yeah, that's sort of the timeline of the time that I put in.
Did you find it difficult when you were still a student in the Clayton school system? Were you having to sacrifice the amount of time you spent doing your homework and your academic classes? And was that any kind of a problem for you?
Yeah, so I made a very big, I made a conscious decision and a conscious effort to essentially have as little school as possible. So I was taking the easiest classes. I was at school as little as I needed to be. I would have to be in like the school orchestra to be a member of the youth orchestra. That was a qualification needed. But in my free periods, I would practice. And but yeah, I was at school as little as I needed to be because I needed to be practicing because there was nothing else that was going to get me to Juilliard.
Right. Right.
And, I think that Clayton could have done a better job of understanding what I was trying to do, but they're great. And that's another story.
Right. Okay. So I want to hear a little bit about some of the early milestones. You won both of those. You won that I mentioned in the introduction, those 2 concerto competitions. What concerti did you play? And tell us also about your performance with the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra on New Year's Eve in 2016.
Sure. So in 2015, I won the concerto competition for the first time, and I played the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, which is a staple. It's such a good one. If you haven't heard it, go listen to it after this.
Right.
It's a really, really beautiful concerto, and that was obviously a really big deal for me. It was the first time that I had ever played a full concerto with orchestra, but it was just such a thrill. I'll never forget, I remember one point in the middle of the performance where I was like, oh my God, I'm having so much fun right now. Like, this is just, I'm peaking, this is just what I live for. So that was my sophomore year of high school. And then my senior year of high school, I entered again, and I won with the Tchaikovsky Concerto, which, again, another staple. And a little anecdote about the Tchaikovsky Concerto is that was really special. Yeah, that was even more special for me than the Mendelssohn, because the Tchaikovsky Concerto specifically is what my dad was playing around the house when I was growing up.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
And there's this big moment in the concerto where the soloist finishes a really big moment, and the whole orchestra comes in, after the soloist is done. And at that point, and every time it came out in the recording, my dad would like throw me up in the air and catch me, and like just, it brings chills to me right now, because in the moment when that happened, I remember my eyes filling with tears, because it was just such a full circle moment that I couldn't help but cry. So that was my senior year. And so the audition for that was in November, I think. And that December, and the concert for that wasn't later that year until May. But that December, I just one day came home from school and had an email from the vice president of external affairs at the St. Louis Symphony, and or I think the email was actually from David Robertson himself. I think the vice president of external affairs was communicating with my mom, and he said to my mom, "Look, there's really big news coming her way, but it's a surprise and you can't tell her." So that day I got home from school and I got an email from Maestro Robertson, and he asked me to be the soloist at the New Year's Eve performance. And I just sobbed. Like I was just running around my kitchen, like running in circles, because, you know, since 7th grade, when I joined the youth orchestra for the first time, the St. Louis Symphony was just my idols. They were just my idols. And I looked up to every one of them. And, you know, David Robertson is still just such an icon, that for him to have noticed me and for him to want me in that big of a role for this concert that he cherishes more than maybe any concert in the season.
Right.
I was just eternally touched. So that concert was on New Year's Eve. I played a showpiece called Zigeunerweisen by Sarasate. And it was, I don't have, like, there are no words to describe how it felt. I mean, my teachers were on stage with me, you know, playing in the orchestra behind me. And, you know, to be there next to Maestro Robertson, and to be there in a sold out Powell Hall, and to be in this magnificent gown, like, it was just, the whole thing was just beyond a dream. And I took my first bow, I walked on stage, I came back on stage, and I was just flooding with tears. So that was December, and that was truly an experience that I'll never forget. Then later that May, I played the Tchaikovsky with the orchestra at the final concert of the season, which also was super special because it was my last concert with the youth orchestra before I went to school.
Right.
It was just the most amazing way to finish my time there.
Oh, that's fantastic. What an incredible series of thrills that must have been for you. I don't want to neglect your performances of Kol Nidre for CRC, which have, I think there have been a combination. You said you came back to St. Louis to perform live, obviously, several times until COVID hit, right? So what's that been like for you to be making a special trip to St. Louis in order to play Kol Nidre?
I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know if there are words to express how special it actually is. But, you know, I've been a member of CRC my whole life. And so, you know, after going through my bat mitzvah training and having my bat mitzvah and just feeling so close to all the rabbis and just the whole community, to be asked to bring my craft into the sanctuary was just so meaningful. And every year, whether it's a recording that's being live streamed or whether I get on the plane to fly home just to do it, it is just really, it's so touching. And, you know, it's such a special moment in, you know, on the calendar, that I think that the way that the music expresses, you know, the specific music for that prayer is so deep in my heart that I'm just so grateful to have the opportunity. And also, in addition to playing Kol Nidre, I also play the theme from Schindler's List on the memorial service the following day. And that started as a tribute to dear Eileen Joseph, who was like an aunt to me. So that is also just a really full circle moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Juilliard, you entered at 18, I gather. So you've been there now this is your start of your what, fourth year there.
This is the start of my fifth year. So I did 4 years for undergrad, and now I've just started my master's.
Yeah. Okay. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a student at Juilliard. I mean, for one thing, of course, the level of competition is the highest. I read online, I think that something like 8% of applicants to Juilliard are admitted. So right from the get-go, you're, I mean, it's, you're in very, we have some extraordinarily stiff competition. But what's it like to be among other like-minded young people, like, who share your passion, some of whom are no doubt not as accomplished as you, and a few perhaps who are even more, because after all, it is Juilliard. So with that long preamble, I'm basically asking you to tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a student there. And what do you do all day? Let me add that as a postscript.
So Juilliard is a very unique place for a lot of reasons. It is one of the only conservatories that covers multi-divisions. So Juilliard has a music division, a drama division, and a dance division. So it's really sort of a pinnacle for the arts. And on top of that, the location is directly across the street from the heart of Lincoln Center, which is where the New York Philharmonic, the Metropolitan Orchestra, and the New York City Ballet are homed. So to be in a classroom and to look across the street and see that is just, beyond motivating and inspiring. So that's something that I still can't, I still won't take for granted. But yes, it is a very competitive place. We are surrounded by our competition at all times. And, that can get draining and that can take an emotional toll. But for me, I try so hard to stay focused in what I love about what I do. And there are going to be people that are better than me, and there are going to be people that get opportunities that I don't. But there are also going to be opportunities that I get that other people don't. So it's really just a balance of maintaining my passion and understanding that I will not receive every opportunity. And regardless, this is still what I love to do and how I want to spend my life. So that is really the mindset. But, to be on the floor where all the practice rooms are, and to be surrounded by people playing the same piece that you are at the time, or, things like that where you can't help but compare yourself.
Right.
That can get draining. But yeah, it's really just a balance. And the other thing is that I feel super lucky because I entered with a class of people that I never knew that I deserved to be surrounded by. I grew up in St. Louis, which I love St. Louis with my whole heart. It's my home. It will always be. But I never really found my circle. Part of that was because I think that, no one really understood what I was trying to do. There was no one else trying to do what I was doing.
Sure. Yeah.
So that in itself had me a little bit, isolated.
Mhm.
So to go to Juilliard and to come into this community where we all have this underlying passion for an
Right.
art form,
Right.
whether it's drama or whether it's dance, it's still a performing art.
Right.
So we have all spent years and years and hours and hours and hours working towards, the same goal of performing and presenting what we love to do. And so that is just an immediate sense of bonding. And I truly have the best friends that I've ever had. My circle is too good to be true. They're my friends my dad always told me that in college I was going to meet my best friends. And once again, my father was right.
Right. Right. Yeah, sure. So tell us a little bit about the routine of a student at
Sure.
Juilliard.
So it's not consistent. It definitely depends based off of the time of year, based off of your current assignments. But you have, as a master, I'll just speak as a master's student. You have one lesson per week, which is an hour long. You usually have about an hour of chamber music rehearsal, and then an hour of chamber music coaching. So I'm in a string quartet right now. We rehearse, 1 to 2 hours a week, and then we also have an hour coaching. And we go to class. I'm in 2 classes right now, which are 2 hours each. They meet once a week. And then
These are performance classes, Hava? I mean, you're not sitting there with a notebook and a pen, or are you?
Well, for one of them is a performance workshop where it's centered around music written in the past 2 centuries. So it's more focused on, early or later music, I should say. And that we do get our instruments and play for each other. The other class is actually not a performance class. It's called the American Symphony, and I'm just learning about 20th century American composers and, their symphony writing. But there's a bunch of other classes that are offered in both categories. There's like a peak of psychology performance class, but there's also, a Baroque concerto class. There's really a variety, but the mission of the master's degree compared to the undergrad is that the master's degree is really centered on getting you ready to go into the real world. And therefore, you're in less class, you have less assignments, you're writing fewer essays, you're taking fewer tests, just so that you have the time to practice however many hours you want to practice and play with your quartet and play an orchestra rehearsal and play orchestra concerts, which that's really what's enhancing your career.
Right. Right.
So, I don't have to be at school very much, but on top of that, I'm practicing 5 hours a day. So the day sure does fill up. I'll tell you that much. But it's a really nice balance.
Do you practice in your apartment, or do you practice at school in a studio?
This year I'm practicing much more in my apartment, just because I like it here. It's my happy place. But school, there's also a bunch of practice rooms. So I go back and forth. I usually practice at school, when I have like a 2-hour break in my day, when, it wouldn't make sense for me to come all the way home. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, let me just make the observation that some of your earlier comments about your mindset sounded very, very wise to me. I mean, for what it's worth. I mean, all young people, going off to college in a competitive environment can feel a lot of stress, but I think it's obviously amped up, exponentially for somebody who's in an environment where it's all about performance. It's literally all about performance. It's not in your head, it's for real. And so it's very important that you be able to approach it with, that you have a philosophy of, what you're trying to do. And it sounds like you really thought that through, and it's held you in good stead. How about now in the summers? I understand you've been playing in Aspen with the likes of some people who have a bit of reputation themselves. People like Joshua Bell and Orly Shahan and David Robertson again. Why don't you tell our audience here tonight a little bit about what that has been like, and how many summers is it now that you've been playing in Aspen?
So I went to Aspen from 2015 to 2019. So I spent 5 summers in Aspen. I was supposed to spend my 6th summer there in 2020, but COVID. So I spent 5 summers in Aspen, which was a absolutely magnificent experience. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. It's just like so magnificent. But it's a really, really strong program there. It's a big program. It's about 800 students there total, opera students and orchestral students combined. And it's orchestra focused. So it's an 8-week long season of about 3-4 orchestra concerts per week, and then about 2 operas throughout the whole season. And it's a really, really amazing opportunity. You get exposure to a bunch of different teachers that come from conservatories around the country. And so you get the opportunity to work with them. And you get opportunities to meet conductors and soloists that come in from around the world to conduct these concerts. And that was a really, really remarkable experience, to sit in the orchestra while, these legendary world-renowned soloists are playing with you. So that was really great. So Joshua Bell is a name that a lot of people know.
Right.
I will just say that he had a great career and he's still playing. He's definitely not the most favorited. He has, sort of a notorious reputation for just sort of his personality and the decisions that he makes.
Howard, you've just opened a gold mine here. But
no, that's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, all right.
But, in addition to that, to play with Orly Shaham, who is this magnificent pianist, and, more exposure with David Robertson and, all of these conductors and soloists. Some of my favorite violin soloists, came, and so that was really amazing. I wouldn't trade that for the world. And then this past summer, I went up to Blue Hill, Maine, which is a really small town in Maine. And I was there for about 7.5 weeks, and I played at the Kneisel, it's called the Kneisel Hall Chamber Music Festival and School, which is run by one of my current teachers, Lori Smuckler, and that is a chamber music intensive. So there's no orchestra. It's only small ensemble playing. And so we had 2 concert cycles over the 8 weeks. And it was really just sort of this utopian bubble, COVID-free bubble, in the woods, where there was, minimal cell service and, bugs everywhere. And, it was just fun. It was just really the full experience. And I was there with my closest friends. So it was really amazing.
Fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about your aspirations, Hava. I think that you've mentioned to me that that not only do you want to be a concert, not only do you want to play in an orchestra, play the violin orchestra, you'd like to be a concert master. Why don't you talk a little bit, explain to the audience what that means and why that is your goal?
Sure. So this is something that I am pretty convinced at this point that the St. Louis Symphony Youth Orchestra, in addition to Aspen, really sort of fostered this for me. But My specific dream, my specific goal is to be concertmaster of a major city orchestra. So concertmaster is the term for the person that sits in the first chair, which is the person on the farthest side of the stage. If you're looking at the stage to the left of the conductor, the person that walks on stage and takes the first bow and then stands up and tunes the orchestra, that's the concertmaster.
Right.
And so that's my dream. I just have so much fun playing in an orchestra where you're surrounded by, sometimes 80 musicians on a stage, and you're just all contributing to this absolutely grand, magnificent product. I think it's just one of the most magnificent things that society has to offer. Mm-hmm. And I think part of it is I'm such an extrovert. I love people. I love socializing. So to be surrounded by, my peers and my colleagues and to all be contributing to the same product is really, really so fun. And the repertoire is magnificent. And, it's like I said about Aspen, it's exposure to conductors and soloists. And so that aspect of it is also really cool. And in addition to that, I love being in a leadership position. I love, being responsible for decisions that are being made or being mm-hmm. asked questions or showing up to the first rehearsal and getting to know everybody in my section and introducing myself and just sort of spreading a positive, kind, passionate vibe throughout the orchestra, I think is something that I take really seriously because I think that it pays off. But yeah, it's definitely quite a lot of pressure, but
right.
But yeah, that's my dream.
Well, obviously we all hope that you not only fulfill it, but fulfill it relatively quickly. Let me see what questions we may have from the audience here. And I'm going to have to bend over and see. Here's a question from Lawrence Amerton, who asks, do you do any composing yourself?
Not even a little bit. I've tried, I've had some assignments in theory class and whatnot, but it is just not my thing. I'm not great at it. I'm actually not even good at it. So I just don't even really try. I leave that up to the composers themselves because they know what they're doing.
Do you have here's a question from someone named Rudy. Do you have a role model as a violinist? Is there one violinist in particular, Hava, who you think, is what you would like to sound like?
Yeah, so there's one person in particular that I would like to sound like, but I would also that also just sort of inspires me on a different playing field. And that is Itzhak Perlman. Itzhak Perlman has always been, for as long as I can remember, he's been sort of a guiding inspiration for me. And of course, his violin playing is absolutely magnificent. It is so soulful. It is so passionate. And that's one of the things that I care about most in my own playing, is that my soul and my passion and my heart comes across. And on top of that, he overcame a massive adversity. And right. he recovered from polio disease. And he still wears crutches on stage and sits in a chair. And the way that doesn't stop him is really, really quite remarkable. And everybody has their thing. Everybody has their blemish, their whatever. And so to find the comfort and confidence in, his craft and my craft, and to overcome that is really what inspires me the most.
He's positively joyful. He just radiates that.
Yes.
Yeah. Here's a question from Natalie Schatzman, who asks, what has your journey taught you in how you approach life and challenges that come your way? And do you get the opportunity to mentor younger people than yourself who are rising musicians?
So it's definitely a two-part question. I'll start with the first part because it relates to my previous answer. Mm-hmm. And that is that resilience is key. Resilience is the way to keep going. I've had many adversities in my life, emotionally, physically, but the violin has kept me afloat. And so that is sort of, that's sort of my shtick, I think that, on top of that side of adversity, like I was saying earlier, I'm not going to receive every opportunity. So to go for something and be turned down, I can't let every no, I can't be eternally distraught by every time that I'm not chosen for something. So resilience in both of those ways is definitely, my thing. And in terms of mentoring, I try to shed that when I mentor as well. But in 2019, when I was in Aspen, I was a mentor in the orchestra. It was a specific fellowship that I received. And so I sat principal second violin of the section there. And my goal was to mentor the rest of the section who was majority younger students.
Yeah.
So I would lead the weekly coachings, and I would give them advice. They would come to me for help. Sometimes they would ask to meet with me one-on-one to review their part. That was definitely the biggest mentoring role I've had thus far, but I'm looking forward to enhancing my teaching aspect of my craft, because that's sort of inevitable. So
right.
I'm hoping that
did you enjoy that role, Hava?
I loved it. I loved it. Yeah.
Great. Here's a question from Marcy Mara Eisen. She says, does someone with your aspirations as a concertmaster start as a concertmaster in a smaller city or a different chair in a higher level orchestra? In other words, where do you see yourself after completing your master's?
Hi, Marcy. Nice to hear from you virtually. So it's a really good question. The answer is no, that starting as concertmaster is sort of a step too far, baby steps. I have to start somewhere. And the way that it goes is I essentially have to jump on an opportunity when there's an opening. So when there's an opening that seems reasonable for me. So, concertmaster of the New York Philharmonic is probably not the most realistic way to start. But, playing in the section of somewhat of a smaller city, maybe Houston or Detroit or something on a little bit of a smaller scale, is definitely more reasonable. And then from there, as higher spots open up around the country, I stay open. So I'll start in a position maybe 2 years somewhere, 2-3 years somewhere, and then I'll keep up my shredding and try for a higher seat.
Makes sense. Hava, let's talk about some of the music that matters to you the most. Are there there must be a few particular composers. I'm not going to ask you who's your favorite composer because it's a sort of ridiculous question, but who are a few of the composers that speak to you most deeply?
Yeah. I think because of my intention for my passion, my soul, and my heart to come across in my playing, romantic classical music is really sort of what speaks to me the fastest. If I spend enough time with something, it will undoubtedly become a part of me. But the romantic genre, so maybe 1850 to 1920, the Beethoven, the Brahms, the Tchaikovsky, the Sibelius, that stuff is really sort of my go-to. But I also love to play earlier music than that. I love to play Mozart. I just love to play Mozart. Playing Bach is a staple. Haydn symphonies are super fun to play. I can't pick one.
Yeah, sure.
But I would definitely say that the romantic genre is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we have a few more questions that have come in. Let me see what they are. Okay, Allie Abrams is asking, have you ever played with Yo-Yo Ma? What do you think about the Silk Road Ensemble and their mission?
Hi, Allie. Thank you for your question. I don't think that I've ever actually played with Yo-Yo Ma. I've seen him perform multiple times. And he's actually, as an alumni of Juilliard, he is at school a lot. He's a really good friend of the current presidents. And so, there was one time a couple of years ago, I think it was my junior year of undergrad, where I went downstairs into the lobby and Yo-Yo Ma was just playing Bach sonatas in the lobby. And I was just like, okay, I guess I'll stand here and listen because I'm not going to walk home. So that was a really notable one, but I don't think I've ever played with him. I would absolutely love to have the opportunity, but his ensemble, the Silk Road Ensemble, if I know correctly, they sort of play, they make an effort to play internationally recognized music of all cultures. There's nothing that, they turn down. And that is, of course, very important. These days, there's even more of a mission to play underrepresented music, which I think is absolutely crucial. So I think that that ensemble is absolutely a inspiration for all of us to explore other cultures and explore other genres. And so I speak only amazing things of the Silk Road Ensemble.
Lawrence Amington has another question. Do you play popular or bluegrass as well as classical? Nope.
No, not even a little bit. I'm sorry.
You don't have to apologize, Hava. It's quite all right. John Samet is asking, which edition of the Bach Sonata Partitas do you favor or more closely follow in regard to better bowings for sound production? I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, perhaps Galamian or Hedrick Shearing?
Yeah, so first of all, it's a really great question. I usually follow the Galamian edition, but I tried to actually go off of Bach's manuscript, which is in the back of the edition. They have his literal manuscript there. So I try to keep my eye on that as frequently as I can to just sort of remind myself what Bach's intention was. And then from there, I will slightly refer to Galamian's editions, but I also have to keep in mind what's best, what feels best for me. And, that's most important.
Um, how about you're practicing 5 hours a day, you have classes, you have to eat, I presume, and sleep a little bit. But do you find any time to relax away from the violin and away from school? And if so, what is it that you do?
So my time that is not with the violin is very limited. um, but when I do make somewhat of an effort to give time for myself to do other things. And I love to exercise. I love to just sort of like take care of my body and go walk on the Hudson River, or go down to the gym and sort of work off some of the stress and competitive energy from the day, say. I really enjoy doing that. And that is also actually nice for me because that gives me an opportunity to listen to other genres of music. So when I'm working out or when I'm walking, I do not listen to classical music. I just like force myself to, turn on the, pop hits or whatever. But, I love sort of pop and hip hop, kind of. I don't know. I love the real sort of genuine artists that we have in our time. The first ones that come to mind are John Legend and Alicia Keys and Adele, and they all just feel so genuine to me that they are some of my go-tos. But yeah, that's how I spend my other time. And when it's not that, it's with my best friends when we socialize, and we still do not listen to classical music.
We have, let me see. It looks like there's still perhaps more questions floating in. Yeah, there are. So here, Nancy Goldstein is asking, not asking, she's commenting. She's saying, your grandfather, Jack Shapiro, is so proud of you.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for that. That means so much. Thank you.
Adam Zoll is saying, what's the most challenging or rewarding piece you've played? And aside from the violin, what are some of your other favorite instruments? That's a good question.
Hi, Adam. It's so nice of you to be on this call. My instinctual response is that the hardest piece I have played is probably the Sibelius Concerto, which I studied last year in preparation for my graduate school auditions. And it was just undoubtedly the most technically difficult and technically demanding piece that I have ever played. It was just a lot of technical, it just required a lot of technical study, a lot of runs and a lot of, really fast passages and double stop passages and chord passages. And, and on top of that, you have to make the music, right? So you have to, play the shape of the phrase, and you have to make the start of the phrase and the end of the phrase clear. And there's just so many things to be thinking about. But that was definitely in turn the most rewarding thing I had played. I had to record the entire concerto from my grad school auditions. And so to have that, have that product was really quite rewarding. And in terms of some of my other favorite instruments, I love the cello. I've always loved the cello. I always have said if I didn't play the violin, I would play the cello. I'm just trying to go through the sections. I love the clarinet. I think the clarinet I think it could be from my, Jewish background, but it's, one of the most commonly played instruments in klezmer music. So there's just something so soulful and I love the range of it. It's has just such a beautiful timbre, and I love brass instruments. I love the French horn. I love the trombone. But I think the violin is the best. So.
Well, Hava, that may be a good note for us to end on. It's certainly the best in your hands.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for your time tonight. And I think this has, been a great, I'm just delighted because, as I said in the introduction, for years, we've all listened to you playing your violin, but, not a word from that mouth. And to hear all of these words, and so beautifully shaped, so beautifully chosen, and to see you, so animatedly talk about your life and your passion is really, I think, a thrill for many of us.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor. I'm so happy that I had the opportunity to do this. And I'm sending my loves to the whole community, as always.
Well, it's returned. Thank you, Hava.
Thank you so much.